Welcome to my channel. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. I'll tell you a story about something that happened to me back in the old days. It was years ago, back when I was a younger man, full of energy and maybe not as smart as I thought I was. Life in the village was slow, and hunting was one of the few things that gave me a sense of freedom. You know how it is. Out in the woods, it feels like you can breathe properly, like the world's yours for the taking. So one day, I decided to go hunting. I grabbed my crossbow, some arrows, and head out into the forest before dawn. The sun was barely up when I left, the air crisp and cold against my face. The woods were quiet except for the occasional sound of leaves and the chirping of birds. I wandered deep, following the trails of animals, and before I knew it, the sun was starting to dip in the sky. I hadn't caught anything yet, but I wasn't too worried. But then, as I was walking, I saw something through the trees, and I thought it was just the way the light was hitting the forest. But as I got closer, I realized it was something more. There was a village hidden deep in the woods. Now you know as well as I do that back in those days, villages didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Everyone knew where everyone else lived. But this place, I'd never heard of it before. The houses were old, their wooden walls rotting with age. Roofs sagged, and the paths between them were overgrown with weeds. It was like the forest had started swallowing it whole. I should have left. I know that now. But back then, I was curious. I thought maybe someone still lived there. Maybe some old folks who didn't want to leave their home. So I walked in, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" No one answered, but I didn't think too much of it. I figured it was just an empty village, abandoned for who knows how long. The sun was almost gone by then, and I realized I wasn't going to make it back to my village before nightfall. The woods were dangerous at night, with wild animals and spirits roaming around. So I decided to stay. I picked one of the houses, the one that looked the least likely to collapse on me. Inside, it was dusty and smelled like damp wood, but it was better than sleeping outside. There was even an old bamboo mat in the corner, though I didn't want to think about how long it had been there or who'd last used it. I set my things down, lit a small fire in the corner to keep warm, and ate some dried meat I'd brought with me. The firelight flickered against the walls, casting shadows that danced like they had minds of their own. As I sat there, I started to notice things I hadn't seen before. There were carvings on the walls, strange patterns that didn't look like anything I'd seen before. They were almost like faces, but not quite. The longer I looked, the more uncomfortable I felt, so I turned away and focused on the fire. It wasn't long before I decided to sleep. The mat wasn't comfortable, but it was better than the dirt floor. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind outside. It was quiet, too quiet. Then, sometime in the middle of the night, I heard it. At first it was faint, like the sound of someone crying far away. I thought maybe it was the wind playing tricks on me, but the sound grew louder, clearer. It was definitely crying. You ever hear someone cry and just feel it in your chest? That's what it was like. It wasn't the kind of crying you hear when someone's sad. It was empty, like whoever was crying didn't have anything left in them, except that sound. I sat up, my heart pounding. The crying was outside, somewhere in the village. I told myself it was probably just the wind, maybe an animal, but deep down, I didn't believe it. The crying got closer. I grabbed my crossbow, my hands shaking. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but having it made me feel a little less helpless. The sound was moving, coming down the path between the houses. My fire had died down to embers, and the room was almost completely dark. I stayed as quiet as I could, barely breathing. The crying stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. I strained my ears, trying to hear anything, and then I realized I could hear footsteps. They were slow and dragging. The footsteps stopped right outside the house. I froze. My grip on the crossbow tightened, and I stared at the door, half expecting it to burst open. But nothing happened. Then I heard it. A whisper. It was so faint I almost thought I imagined it. but it was there, just outside the door. The voice was low. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like it was calling for someone. I don't know how long I sat there, holding my breath, waiting for something to happen. The whispering stopped, and for a moment I thought it was over. But then the crying started again, louder this time. It was inside the house. I don't know how it got in. I didn't see the door open, didn't hear anything move, but the sound was coming from the corner of the room where the mat was. I didn't want to look. Every instinct in my body was telling me not to look, but I couldn't help it. I turned my head slowly and saw nothing. The corner was empty, but the crying was still there, loud and clear. I can't explain it. I don't know how to make you understand what it felt like to hear something that wasn't there. Then the crying stopped, and the whispering started again, right next to me. I bolted. I didn't think about my things, didn't care about the dark forest outside. I just ran out of that house. When I bolted out of the house, my legs felt like they were running on their own. I didn't stop to think, or even try to make sense of what just happened. I just ran. The cold night air hit my face and my breaths came out in sharp gasps. But I didn't care. As I sprinted through the overgrown paths of that abandoned village, I could still hear it. The crying. It wasn't behind me at first, not exactly. It was like it was all around me, echoing from every direction. But then, as I kept running, it started to change. It wasn't just around me anymore, it was behind me. I don't know how to describe the sound, but it was like the crying was chasing me. With every step I took, it got louder, closer. I don't know how I kept going. My chest was burning, my legs felt like they were about to give out, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. But the thought of stopping, of letting that sound catch up to me, was worse than anything else. I kept running. The crying stayed with me the whole way, like it was tied to me, refusing to let me go. At some point, I realized I was getting close to the edge of my village. I could see the trees at the outskirts, their dark silhouettes against the night sky. I just had to make it there. The crying grew louder, almost deafening now. It was like it didn't want me to leave, like it was trying to pull me back. I could feel my legs slowing down, my body screaming at me to stop, but I didn't. When I finally crossed the edge of the village, the crying stopped. Just like that, it was gone. No fading, no echo, just silence. I collapsed right there, falling to my knees in the dirt. I was dead tired, every muscle in my body shaking. My lungs felt like they were on fire, and I could barely catch my breath. I don't know how I made it out. To this day, I still don't understand how I managed to run that far, that fast. It was like something inside me refused to let me stop until I was safe. I sat there at the edge of the forest for what felt like hours, too scared to move, too exhausted to care. Eventually, I forced myself to stand and started making my way back to my house. When I got home, I didn't tell anyone. All I knew was that I never wanted to go back to that place, and I never wanted to hear that crying again. Thank you for listening to this video. I'll see you in the next one.